Okay, welcome everybody to the content of their character. We have been exploring for the month of February the subject of welcoming guests, and this is our fourth class and final class for this theme of the subject of welcoming guests. We saw how Abraham is the paradigm of this mitzvah, of this value, as he was sitting outside the entrance of his tent after his Brit Milah, and he runs to greet these three strangers, even though he may be in pain, even though it's extremely hot, and he welcomes them in immediately, going to great lengths to cook them a fine, enormous, large meal. We also saw last week that escorting a guest out is extremely important as well. Not only to welcome them in, but to accompany them and to walk with them as they are leaving you, as they're taking leave. That too is an essential part of welcoming guests, escorting them as they take their leave. I want to begin today's class with a story. I hope you are sitting comfortably, and we will begin with a beautiful story, yet a story which is not without its own problematic moments. So take a listen to the following, and tell me what you think of it. I'll be actually very curious to hear what you think of the following story. This is a story that takes place in Jerusalem. A guest comes for a family Shabbat meal in the city of Jerusalem. The guest noticed that there were 6 people sat at the table. The host, 1, his wife, 2, their 3 children, 5, and the guest himself. That made 6 people. Family of 5 and the guest. The guest makes 6. At that point, he also noticed that only 5 pieces of chicken were served at the table. The host gave a whole piece of chicken to the guest, and now he's got a problem, because if he's going to give a piece of chicken to each and every one of his kids, well, he doesn't have enough. And so he takes the last piece of chicken, cuts it in half, and shares it between the last 2 children. The guest felt like he was imposing on this family, and he felt, this family doesn't have enough food to eat. Everyone has only 1 piece of chicken. As a result of me being here, what's ended up happening is they didn't have enough food to feed their kids. He cut in half the last piece of chicken and shared it with those 2 last kids. Oy, oy, oy. Even though the guest would later report that no one seemed to mind. No one else at the table seemed to be too bothered. However, after having a somewhat lovely time at his host's house for Shabbat, the guest then refused all future further invitations to eat there ever again. Stop there for a moment in the middle of the story. Why did the guest refuse all future invitations? Go on, Elaine. I'll unmute you. What's the answer? Why did he refuse all future invitations?
He felt that he had seriously imposed on the family and did not ever want a repeat situation.
Precisely. Thank you. He felt that he had seriously imposed on the family. He felt awful. And the last thing he wanted to do as a guest was feel like he was an imposition. He refused to ever go back to that family. Months and months and months later, after refusing, he finally accepts an offer to eat with them again. This time, he knows not to make the same mistake. He comes with an enormous box of chocolates. And he shares the chocolates for the host's children as a gift. However, something then very unexpectedly happened. When he gave the chocolates to the kids, the children said thank you, and they immediately ran out of the room. A minute later, the children returned from outside in the street where they had run to, coming back with 9 of their friends. So that's an awful lot of kids in the house. And at that point, how many kids were there? There were 3 kids, right? At that point, 12 children all sat down on the living room floor, opened up the box of chocolates, started to portion it out among themselves, and they all had big beaming smiles on their faces. And it was at that point, it's a true story. This is written up in the book, The Maggid Speaks, written by Rabbi Pesach Kron, one of the famous storytellers of Jerusalem. This is a true story. At that point, it dawned on the guest that the children, now listen carefully, the children had been so positively educated about sharing their food with guests that they actually got more enjoyment when given a box of chocolates from sharing this box of chocolates with others. They got more enjoyment from sharing it with others than they did actually gobbling it all up and having it among themselves. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Now, I want to share something a little bit embarrassing. And I know we're being filmed and this is on video, but you'll excuse me. I don't mind being a little bit vulnerable from it. If I come home with a chocolate bar for one of my kids, I promise you they are not sharing it with anybody. And if so, God help her, the 5-year-old should reach out and grab, as she is wont to often do, then all hell will break loose in the Fishman household with, get your hands off my chocolate, this is mine. No, give me some, give me, no. And I don't know if I'm the only failing parent here. Maybe this story resonates with you. And if you've been fortunate enough to have children, maybe this sounds familiar. But I read that story and I immediately thought of my own kids, because as soon as I would give something to one of them, the others dive in. And at that point, there's no chance that the others are going to share. But think about this for a moment. In the most amazing, most beautiful way, after bringing a box of chocolates into the children had a more greater sense of enjoyment, running out into the street, grabbing as many friends as they possibly could, bringing them back inside so they could share their chocolates with friends, as opposed to just eating it among themselves. Now, I started that story by saying that there was an aspect that was problematic. And the aspect that is problematic, and I'm sure you intuited it as I was reading it to you, is that if on his first visit to the house, the guest feels that he is imposing, that he is an imposition on this family, to the degree that he doesn't even want to come back, I think that there is something off. There's something missing with the hospitality that's being extended. Now, it's true, this family loved performing acts of hospitality, and they absolutely loved performing acts of kindness to the degree that they were willing to cut up the last piece of chicken and share it among the final 2 children, and the kids were okay with it, because we love entertaining, we love hospitality. However, that might be the level that you are on. But to a guest who isn't familiar with your family's level of kindness, who isn't familiar with how you do things, you might actually, in an attempt, this is how, what do we say in English? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We have that expression. You might have had the best of intentions, and you're the nicest people, and you practice the greatest level of kindness. Yet, notwithstanding your good intentions, because an outsider isn't familiar with your norms and values and behaviors, you've ended up making them feel extremely uncomfortable. And so I think it's extremely important that a host, and when I say a host, who am I talking about? I'm talking about you. You are the host. Okay. What day is it today? It's Tuesday. What does that mean? It means there's 4 days until Shabbat. Okay. That's the only way we count the days of the week. How many days left until Shabbat? If today's Tuesday, we're down to 4 days left. Still a good time to get your Shabbat invitations out, by the way. Call up a friend. If you really want to be a righteous person, call up someone that you've fallen out with and you're not speaking to so much. Invite them for Shabbat. Invite them for Shabbat. By the way, I'll go into a more serious topic. I have to speak about this because it's like front and center. You'll excuse me for getting a little serious. As you know, I'm sure you've been following the news out of Israel. There's been some very, very sad events that have happened over the last 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks and even the last 2 days. And it's heartbreaking to watch. And if you're following any Israeli website, any news site, it's so sad. By the way, if you don't keep up with the news, then timesofisrael.com is a simple and very mainstream online newspaper. Okay? That's the one I read. It's maybe a centrist paper. It's not necessarily right-wing. It's not necessarily left-wing. I would say it's basically a centrist approach. Times of Israel. And God bless you. And Times of Israel, you should follow the news. You should follow what's happening with our brothers and sisters in Israel. So there was an awful, awful attack yesterday where 2 brothers were killed. They were driving a car. It's just so, so sad. And today, there has been a campaign going around. I must have received this text message 3-4 times that said that in an effort to show brotherly harmony in the merit of these 2 brothers who loved one another, we would like the Jewish people in Israel to reach out to someone that you're not on speaking terms with, or you're not so friendly with, and invite them to come to your home this Shabbat. Or for Purim, you know, there's a mitzvah on Purim of giving gifts of food, mishloach manot, shalach manas, in the Yiddish pronunciation, you know about mishloach manot. So it said, pass over a mishloach manot to someone that you're not so close with or you're not so friendly with, and write the line, and this will be the standard line, I'm sending you this as an act of brotherly solidarity. And it will allow the person to know, I want to make up with you. I want to rebuild our relationship together. And it's a beautiful campaign. And look, what do you do in the face of murder? You can't bring those people back. And there's very little that could be done when you're dealing with this terrible and complicated situation. And yet the Jewish people feel that our response is acts of kindness. It's a beautiful testament to who we are and the types of values we believe in. We don't believe in murder. We don't believe in death. We don't believe in horror. We believe in love and peace and building and brotherly relationships. So it's on my mind right now. So I've received this message many, many times. Send a Mishloach Manot package to someone on Purim with the line, in an act of brotherly solidarity, I send you this gift. And it will allow the person to know that you're trying to make amends and build up the relationship once again. Okay, back to our story. I'm sorry about that tangent. I felt like I wasn't planning on speaking about it. It just naturally, it comes out. And I don't want to get sidetracked by it. There's a lot to speak about. I see a few comments or hands. I'm going to pause. Please excuse me for not getting into this. Otherwise, we won't get to today's class. I know that's a little unfair, but I'll use my teacher's privileges to bypass the questions. So back to my point. The host needs to know, I shouldn't make my guests feel uncomfortable. Will my act of kindness create a feeling of the guest being honored? on the one hand, or the guest feeling uncomfortable on the other hand. And this takes great seichel. This is the lost art of seichel. How do you say seichel? You all know what seichel is, right? It takes a great seichel. Seichel is common sense. It's the closest translation. It's a Yiddish word. It means obviously having intelligence, having emotional intelligence, having common sense, having just your head screwed on properly. It takes seichel to know what is the other person going to be thinking, what is the other person going to be feeling with my act of graciousness, of my act of kindness. Fascinating story, a fascinating story. And it gets to the heart of a major act of hospitality to guests, hear me carefully, is training our children to have the same sense of hospitality to guests. And those of you with adult children, let me ask you, do they have people over to their home? Do they invite people for Shabbat? Would their house be a house that would be considered an open door? And I see lots of you nodding. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Today, that was all an introduction. Okay, that was all an introduction, long introduction. Today, I want to wrap up this subject by looking at the absolutely stunning and beautiful approach that our tradition has to just what the reward for hospitality and accompanying guests at the end of one's meal is. Now, this is something we don't often speak about in Judaism. Why? Because we don't like to enter into the subject of judgmentalism. In 2023, what is the most popular, famous phrase the world over? You do you, and I'll do me, right? This is how we speak. I don't think it's grammatically correct, but you listen to a young person speak nowadays, and this is the language they use. You do you. This is like a colloquialism when people don't particularly get along or see eye to eye with one's behavior. So you say, you know what? You do you, I'll do me, fine. And what's the result of this world where we never judge someone else? We never get into commenting or criticizing. We don't like speaking about right and wrong behavior. It's not part of our easy vocabulary. Even talking about moral judgments in 2023, we find it very difficult to speak about moral behavior and moral judgments. And Judaism has a huge amount to say on the concepts of reward and punishment. We believe that after 120, person is rewarded for the good that they have done. It's an area that is not spoken about very much. But today, we're going to break the taboo and we're going to speak about reward. I'd like you to see just what Judaism has to say about reward for those who are able to entertain guests. Okay, let's go into it. So far, so good. Questions, comments? That was just my introduction. Questions, comments? We're good? Go forwards? Okay, let's go forwards. Here we go. Look at source one. This is absolutely fascinating. The Zohar, book of Jewish mysticism. Book of Jewish mysticism. Don't ask me how they know what the rewards are for certain behaviors. I don't know. I don't know. But take a look at what the Zohar says. Can you see it? I'll make it a bit bigger. The Zohar, the Tikkunei Zohar teaches that the manner in which one welcomes guests in this world determines the manner in which his soul will be welcomed into the next world. Wow. Wow, that is amazing. By the way, you know where you should stick that? You should stick that on your door every time you've got guests coming. So you can be a scoundrel the rest of the year. But when someone's about to knock on your door, hang on, I'm coming. And then just before you open the door, you got this little like quote. Okay. Hi, how you doing? Great to welcome. Come in. I don't know. I don't think it would work that way, obviously. But what a stunning statement. The manner in which one welcomes guests in this world determines the manner in which his soul will be welcomed into the next world. That's incredible. That's incredible. And I think that what this goes to, what this speaks about, is Hachnasat Ochim, welcoming guests, the value of welcoming guests, the mitzvah of welcoming guests. It's almost as if it's a meta mitzvah. It's almost as if it speaks to what is the heart of Judaism. What is the heart of Judaism? What is our culture all about? What is the primary value? Obviously, we have many values, and obviously they're all important. But sometimes you get a glimpse, sometimes you get a peek into what would be the overriding concept. And I think that's what it means. The way a person welcomes guests in this world is how they welcome your soul in the world to come. In other words, the person you are, in terms of your friendliness, in terms of your kindness, in terms of your welcomingness, in terms of being there for others. My example before was very cynical, and the truth is, it wouldn't work. Because if you were a scoundrel the whole year through, and you put a little reminder sticky note on your door, even when the sticky note would be there, when you opened your door, you still wouldn't welcome them with a graciousness. Because who you are is a holistic whole. It just shines through at every single moment of your life. So if in one example, welcoming guests, that's the type of person you are, so then you're going to be a beautiful human being in every other aspect of your life too. They'll welcome you into heaven the same way that you welcome others into your house. Beautiful. Take a look at the next passage. This is a section of the Talmud, text 2. We have a verse from Ezekiel, in Hebrew, Yechezkel. And the verse is speaking about the altar. He's speaking about the temple. There was an altar in the temple. But look very carefully at this verse. It's a fascinating verse. And I want, before we're going to analyze it on the next page, but I purposefully haven't yet turned to the next page. Can you tell me something that sounds strange about this verse? And I'll give you a clue. Focus on the altar inside the temple. Here we go. It is written, the altar was of wood, 3 cubits tall, and its length was 2 cubits, including its corners. Its surface and its sides were of wood. He said to me, this is the table that is before God. Okay, that's a verse from the Bible. You look up Ezekiel chapter 41, verse 22. That is the verse you will find. Apparently an angel is speaking to the prophet Ezekiel, and he tells him about the altar of God. Sounds like it's a bunch of measurements. It's this high, it's this long, it's this tall, it's made of wood. It's before God. Can anyone notice something strange about that verse? Let's read it again. Look carefully. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits tall, and its length was 2 cubits, including its corners. Its surface and its sides were of wood. He said to me, this is the table that is before God. Any Talmudic scholars in this group? Yes, we have a...
Not a scholar, but just a response.
Yes, Lynn, what do you notice? What do you think the Talmud is going to pick up on?
Well, because it's first called an altar and then it's called
Excellent.
a table by the angel.
Excellent. If you... Did that work? Why did that not work? There you go. If you look at the verse at the beginning, we're talking about there. I've highlighted it. You see them? You see my screen? The angel that's speaking to Ezekiel is speaking about an altar of wood. the height, the length, it's wood. And at the end, he switches it. It's a table. Well, which one is it? Is it an altar or is it a table? And if it's an angel that's speaking, don't think for a moment that he's confused himself and he's got mixed up. Clearly, the angel knows exactly what he's saying, and he starts speaking about an altar, and he ends up speaking about a table. Okay, excellent observation, Lynn. Now, on that verse, the Talmud is going to offer a Talmudic interpretation. Okay, look at what the Talmud does. This is fascinating. This is amazing. The Talmud says, this verse seems puzzling. It begins by referencing to the altar and ends off by referring to the same object as a table. Lynn, you should go to rabbinical school, okay? You anticipated the question. Fantastic, 10 out of 10. But now look at what the Talmud does. Rabbi Yochanan, as well as Reish Lakish, explain. These are two of the heavyweights of the Talmud. Do you hear that aeroplane going by? Do you hear that aeroplane? No, you hear nothing?
No.
Okay, that's incredible. If you don't hear, surely you hear that. Do you hear that? No?
I hear something.
Oh my gosh. So I have this is my laptop, by the way. It's a regular computer. I must have the world's greatest microphone because it picks up only my voice. You didn't hear the loudest rumble of your life. You didn't hear that. You would have it was much louder than me speaking to you. But you didn't, like, apparently you didn't pick up on it. Wow. Okay. So I live just south of Jerusalem. Where I live is a no-fly zone. For security reasons, if you're getting on a plane, you have to go to Tel Aviv, you have to go to Ben Gurion Airport, it's a no-fly zone. Everyone in this community knows if an aeroplane is flying overhead, it's for one reason and one reason only. It's not a commercial aeroplane. It means it's an Air Force aeroplane. And so I just heard over my head 3, I think they must have been jets, fly over my head, and they gave the most enormous rumbling, like it was a thunderstorm for a minute. The fact that you didn't hear it is bizarre. It means I have a very powerful microphone on my computer. It only picks up my voice in front of you, not what's going on outside the window. But anyway, you're getting this live from Israel, okay? So tomorrow morning, when you read about something in Syria or Iraq that was bombed, you'll be like, oh, Rabbi Fishman heard the airplanes that flew over. Anyway, all of the pilots and the Air Force should be safe, and all of the boys and girls in the Israeli army should be safe. Okay, back to the Talmud. This is very good. The best thing we can do is learn Torah. There's nothing better right now for the safety and security of the Jewish people than learning Torah. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish explained, when the temple in Jerusalem stood, the altar atoned for one's transgressions by way of the offerings that were burned there. Let's just pause there for a moment. There was a temple in Jerusalem, and when it stood, it would act as a way of atoning for our sins. The Jewish people would do mistakes. We would bring sacrifices, and with a proper contrite heart, and with contrition, and with feelings of regret, the offerings would atone for our transgressions. But look at what he says now. This is amazing. Now, when there is no Beit HaMikdash, when there is no longer any temple, it was destroyed. Now that there is no temple, the table upon which one eats atones for one's transgressions. Wow. How does the table atone? Look at Rashi, the commentary of Rashi. His table atones for him through hospitality to guests. Amazing. Amazing passage of the Talmud. Let's go up again. Look at the verse. Look at the original verse of the Yechezkel. It's written, the altar was of wood, 3 cubits tall, and its length was 2 cubits, including its corners. Its surface and its sides were of wood. He said to me, this is the table that is before God. We move from an altar to a table. And the Talmud claims that if once upon a time the altar in the temple atoned for our transgressions, nowadays when we no longer have a temple, our dining room table atones for our transgressions. Why? In the merit of having guests. Is that not incredible? Is that not incredible? In the merit of having guests. In the merit of having guests. Our dining room table now atones for us. How do you understand this? Anybody? How do you understand that? Why should having guests, why should bringing people over atone for our sins? Yes, Lynn.
Well, I would think that it goes to when one offers hospitality, one recognizes that we are all one before God. And the intention is using that understanding, and the hospitality results from that.
Beautiful. I think I agree with you. I was going to offer something slightly different, but it's in the same vein. When you offer hospitality, you realize you're not the center of the world. You realize that the world doesn't revolve around you. It's actually similar to what you said. You said that we are all one. And it's almost like the other side of the coin, just saying it in different words. There's an innate selfishness that we have to overcome. We're born, a baby, when you look at a baby, it just takes, whether it's nursing or taking food or expecting you to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's hungry. The biologically, a baby is selfish. We're born that way. And it's a vital mechanism to ensure that we stay alive. But the goal of growing up, the goal of becoming a human being is to travel that path of humanity, leaving behind our innate selfishness and opening ourselves up to a selflessness, becoming selfless, thinking not of ourselves, but thinking of others. And I think that when a person extends hospitality, when you have people sat around your table, you're engaged in the ultimate act of what it means to be a human being. Food. There's nothing more I'm hungry. I want food. I want sandwich in my mouth. Here's sandwich. Here's my mouth. I'm hungry. I'm thinking of me. To think of someone else's stomach. It's almost like in a metaphorical level, a paradigm of thinking of others. Maybe you're hungry. Maybe I can help you. And in such a moment, any act of sin, which really is an act of selfishness, is suddenly wiped clean. I find that very beautiful. I find that very beautiful. Yes. Alice, you wanted to add something.
I'm not sure. Just it enhances the notion of peace and community.
100%. 100%. It enhances that altogether-ness component of what it means to live with others. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's go on a little further. A beautiful passage of the Talmud. This is taken in Chagigah 27a. Now, when there is no Beit HaMikdash, our dining room tables atone for our transgressions. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, this next passage in the Talmud is stunning. It's absolutely fascinating, speaking about the tremendous rewards for hospitality or helping another. It needs a little bit of an introduction, just to bring you all up on the same page. There was a time when Joshua conquers the land. Do you remember this from your days of Bible study from Tanakh? Joshua conquers the land, and each tribal area conquered their own tribal territory. In one such moment, there are people from the tribe of Joseph who are trying to capture a city, and they weren't sure where the entrance of the city was. The entrance was always the most vulnerable part. That's where you would attack from. And they asked a passerby, can you tell us where the entrance of the city is, please? What did this passerby do? He didn't speak. He didn't even stop. Mid-walk, he just pointed with his finger and he carried on walking off. Okay? That's the background to this passage. Okay? So people from the tribe of Joseph were trying to capture a city. They didn't know where the front entrance was. Excuse me. They see a passerby. They ask him, how do we get in? Where's the front door? He points. He literally just extends his finger and points. With that introduction, we're now ready for this next passage from the Talmud. The reward for escorting another person is boundless. What a beautiful thing to say. This is escorting another person after they have finished their meal with you. They've finished their meal. You remember last week we saw this. There's a mitzvah to escort a person at least a few steps outside of your front door. By the way, I hope none of them will listen to the video recording afterwards. For the last few days when I've had people over at my home, I've been crazy to do this, and I've escorted people out of my house. I was never so punctilious over this particular mitzvah, but now I'm going, and I must say, I don't think so many people are used to it, because the people, when I'm walking them out, they're giving me a little bit of a puzzled look. They're like, why are you walking out with me? They're a little bit confused. And I'm like, well, just ask anyone from my class. They'll tell you it's a mitzvah to escort someone when you leave. But I think this is one of those mitzvahs that has become a little bit obsolete. It's become forgotten. But look at that. You see the impact you have on me? I'm now escorting people outside of my house. The reward, back to the Talmud, the reward for escorting people is boundless. That sounds good, right? Boundless? Wow. As it is written. Now we're going to give a quote from the passage of the Bible that I was sharing with you at the beginning. The guards saw a man leaving the city and asked him, show us the way into the city. And he showed them the entrance. He was then immensely rewarded because he showed them the way with his finger and saved him. Excuse me, with his finger, they saved him. He thereupon left and built the famous city of Luz. Amazing, right? So here is this individual who walks out of a city. They ask him, where's the entrance? He simply points. And that person went on and founded a famous city. That's an incredible reward. Founded a famous city. Says the Talmud in conclusion, if this Canaanite who did not even utter a word or take one step was rewarded so greatly, imagine the great reward for someone who actually accompanies another by walking with him. Fascinating. Fascinating. And the note that I have here is the above account from this Talmud indicates that you don't even have to be a host to perform the mitzvah of escorting somebody. Anybody who needs directions can act as being able to escort somebody else. Are you with me? This is amazing. This is amazing. You're walking down the street, okay? This can happen to you. A car pulls over right next to you. They roll down their window. How many times has this happened to you? Excuse me, I need your help. I'm not from around here, or I'm lost. I wonder if you can help. Can you tell me how to get to Jean Talon? Can you tell me where Sherbrooke is? How do I get to, I mean, everyone gets lost going to NDG. Let's use that as an example. Everyone gets lost. How do I get to NDG? So, and all you have to do, you don't even have to speak. You just do that. You just do that. You are accompanying somebody. You are hosting, quote unquote. You're not really hosting, but that's the point. You're helping another person. You're escorting another person. It's a stunning insight. A person who's in need, and you help them with the smallest gesture possible. The rewards are endless for such a moment. Question. What's the question? What is the ultimate other? Is it God? This is why welcoming the other is the utmost loving behavior. 100%, Vivian. 100%. 100%. Because what this is doing, it's beautiful insight, Vivian, is it's harnessing our relationship with other. It could be a complete stranger. And if we can relate to the other with a small o, then we can relate to the ultimate other with a big O. I hope you followed me with that, with a capital O, the ultimate other. Let's go further. Maimonides, the Rambam. Look at this. This is incredible. This is law. This is Jewish law. The reward for escorting guests is greater than all other types of kindness. Wow. Stop there. Stop there. If I was to say, describe a kind person to me, you'd say 100 things. They're loving, they're caring, they smile, they always offer to pick me up from the airport. I don't know what. You would have said 100 things. Would you ever have said escorting somebody out of your home? Maybe you would have. Maybe you would, but it probably would have been number 60, 70, 80 on the list. Correct? Who ever would have thought that escorting a guest somewhere would have been a high value in the hierarchy of kindness? But guess what, my friends? It's not a high value in the hierarchy of kindness. What is it? Say it with me. It's the highest value in the hierarchy of kindness. This is mind-blowing. You should be falling off your chairs right now. This is earth-shattering. Are you feeling the power? I'm trying my hardest to present a sense of passion here. I'll read it again. The reward, Maimonides. So this is Jewish law, the Rambam. This is it. The reward for escorting guests is greater than all other types of kindness. Wow. It is the institution established by Avraham Avinu. He would feed passers-by and then escort them on their way. Hospitality is as great as greeting the divine presence. We spoke about that at length in the first two classes. Remember, hospitality, Abraham says to God, you wait here, I've got some guests, I'll be right back. And we learned that hospitality is even greater than greeting God. And escorting guests, here's the punchline. And escorting guests is even greater than extending hospitality. Wow. Say that again, because this is a shock. This is incredible. Hospitality is as great as greeting the divine presence, and escorting guests is even greater than extending hospitality. Hershey, you're off of being unmuted. Yes, question.
Last week you mentioned, talking about Avraham Avinu escorting, you said that today the modern way is you can escort a guest from the house to the sidewalk or so,
exactly.
Not necessarily beyond. So sort of goes in the face of what you're saying right now.
Why?
In the sense that here you're just escorting them. If we listen to this just to the sidewalk, that's not really escorting them. You're just taking them off your property. It's not really escorting.
So I believe that the sense of just bringing them to the sidewalk is the contemporary expression of how one fulfills this mitzvah. You're absolutely right, because when we looked at this last week, do you remember there was like gradations. If the guest is your teacher, if the guest is your rabbi, your primary rabbi, then you had to walk 2 kilometers, you had to walk him back to his home. There were all of these like really far, crazy distances that a person had to. Now we saw already in the 12th century France that, yeah, no one does this anymore. Just take them outside your door 4 steps. You could look at this Hershey and say, come on. I mean, that's not really doing the mitzvah. Like 4 steps outside your front door. What is that? That's like, that's a token gesture. However, I believe that because the expression of this mitzvah has now in more contemporary times, or for the last number of hundreds of years, been something much smaller, this is how we now come to define the gesture. You're right, I'm not walking you 2 kilometers, I'm not walking you all the way back to your house. But if this is how we do it, then even a short little 4 steps, wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. You go on, respond.
I would think that if you're providing hospitality, there is more effort in welcoming and possibly feeding or discussing or meeting with your guest, just to walk them to the sidewalk or a few steps out of your door. To me, it's a cop-out. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying based on, if it's saying that this is the highest level, I don't know.
I hear you. I do. You know what? You're not wrong. You're not wrong with what you're saying. I do hear you. Maybe Maimonides, when he would say escorting guests is even greater than hospitality, maybe he was talking about the original sense of what escorting guests was. That really long, far walking them. Let me say this in my defense. Perhaps, even if you're going to just show them outside the door, even if you're going to walk 4 steps to the sidewalk with them, I want to suggest that the reason it's such an incredibly important mitzvah, and Maimonides turns it into the biggest mitzvah of kindness, is because sometimes when we're at the very end, just before we finish, there can be a psychology that says, don't bother going all the way through to the conclusion. You've done 99%. You can just stop here. It's good enough. And for the guest, you've had a great meal. You've had a great time. And there's the host sitting in his chair, putting his feet up on the table. Bye. See yourself out, will you? At the very, very end, there's been an incompleteness. Something's lacking in terms of how that guest believes he's really thought of, how he thinks the host feels about him. And if you do the final step, even if it's just outside, even if it's 4 steps, even if it's to the curb, the final step, at least in social norms today, that final step, when you take it, the guest is leaving you feeling, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This guy loves me. We finished dinner. He was tired. He just wanted to go to bed. She was exhausted. And look what she did. They walked me outside to the curb. They truly love me and care about me. And I think it's that final concluding act that is going to be the last thing that is left in a person's mind and head and heart as they take leave of their host for that night. That's why I think it's so important. That's why I think there is such drama, such a fanfare that is made concerning this. So, one moment, someone wrote to me in the chat. I was a Shabbos guest, sent on my way to walk. And I was, I was walking in and you were frightened. And then someone accompanied you and you really appreciated it. You know what? I remember this so clearly. I remember this so clearly. This happened. When did this happen? This happened in 2018. What are we now? 2023? This happened the summer of 2018. That's a long time ago. Do you remember like a dinner party 5 years ago? Do you remember the small little nuances and details of a dinner party? So I'm in Jerusalem. I remember exactly who it was. Incredible, righteous human beings. Her name, oh, what was her name? I can see them in front of my eyes. She's a professor at University of Kabbalah. She's a very interesting woman. Maybe I'll get her into the Shah Learning Center. I don't know. Any interest in mysticism and Kabbalah among the group? Okay, a few nods, a few hands. Okay.
Was it Sarah Yehudit Schneider?
No. She teaches a couple of universities. She's a modern woman, and she teaches these men with long beards. It's like just fascinating. It's hysterical to think of. Her name, Biti, B-I-T-I. BT, her last name? I'm blank. If I put it into my phone, I'll admit. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm a Shabbos guest at BT's house. If she's watching this, she's going to get embarrassed, but it's okay. She's not watching small little me and my classes. So I'm a guest at her house, had a lovely Friday night dinner, a beautiful Shabbat meal. We do benching, grace after meals, the Birkat Hamazon, and then I leave. She lived on the top floor of a 3-story apartment. You know those old Jerusalem apartments? They walk down the stairs with me. They see me out to the curb. And already I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I must be so important. I must be such a wonderful guest. They've accompanied me down to the bottom of the curb. She and her husband then walk me all the way to the end of the road. We must have been walking for 10, 15 minutes. I have to tell you, no one has done that to me. I felt like such an honorable, important individual, not in a self-grandized, inflated sense of arrogance. I felt so honored. I felt so loved. Roy, very good. Very good. Thank you, Terry. BT Roy. By the way, she's an exceptional teacher. I'm just talking about her personal life.
It's really good, yeah.
So she might not like me talking about her personal life, but that's okay. There's a lesson of Torah that we can all learn. I felt like $1 million. I felt like $1 million that this individual walked me 15 minutes down the road. And that is exceptional. It's so powerful. It's so, so powerful. It just picks a person up. Let's conclude. Because the last words of Maimonides, this is fascinating. The sages taught whoever does not accompany one's guest is as if he spilled blood. Why? Why?
Yes,
What a strange
because-
thing. Sorry? Ora, yes.
Yes, because let's say particularly in olden times, when there were robbers on the road and
Yes.
all kinds of dangers.
Yes.
If you don't show your guest the right way to go back home, the safe way, he or she might end up in a dangerous path where he would be assaulted by some thieves or even worse, and then you would have spilled his blood. He would have been sort of responsible for spilling his blood.
Okay, you don't send him the right way. You don't send him the right way. You're on the right path.
Okay.
But you didn't hit the nail on the head. Anyone else want to take a stab at that? Or it led us in the right direction. Almost. So listen to the following. The Talmud says the following. If you're leaving somebody's home and they don't accompany you, you're going to feel a little bit down. You're going to feel a little bit dejected. In other words, you're going to feel a little bit small, and you're not going to feel so loved. Now, as a result, you're going to feel deflated. Here we come back to Aura's insertion. What happens if you meet the wrong type of people on the way? God forbid. You meet people that are really, you know, and in the ancient world, when people wanted to attack you and take your money, they oftentimes didn't let you get away with your life. If you're feeling small, if you're feeling deflated, if you're feeling just with that sense of, oh, then you're easily going to be overpowered and potentially even killed if you should have an altercation with robbers, with the wrong type of people. But, says the Talmud, if you leave someone's house and you're feeling joy, and you're feeling elated, and you're feeling strong, and you're feeling wonderful, and you're feeling loved because they have accompanied you part of the way, then when you should meet those wrong individuals and they say, give me your money, you will be so confident, you'll be able to overpower them. It is a bit of a creative fantasy that the Talmud is engaged in here. Somehow or other, you're going to meet a murderous or life-threatening situation of being mugged. I don't know where they get that from, but they say that your internal joy or your internal feeling small is going to be determined by if somebody accompanied you when they escorted you from their home. Do you follow the Talmudic idea? And so we're extrapolating this idea and we're saying, if you don't escort someone, it's as if, we're not saying that you're spilling blood, of course not, but it's as if, it's a concept. We're conceptually saying, what state have you left that person in? What state is that person now feeling in terms of their psychological well-being? And I think it's a fascinating insight. Let's
Rabbi,
finish off. Yes, Alice.
Isn't it also an example of when the notion that if you embarrass someone or if you make someone feel lowly, then it's as if, especially in public, it is as if you're spilling their blood, or you're killing
Very
them.
good. Very good.
So this person feels that they're not being treated. They're ashamed that they weren't good enough that he followed me out. So he feels embarrassed.
Excellent, Alice. Excellent. There's a psychological aspect of being able to help a person's well-being, even their self-esteem, by that final act of hospitality. It's incredible insight. Elaine, yes.
I'd like to ask a question because I see we're coming to a close.
Yes.
So many or most people, I think, pretty well exclusively invite good friends or people they would like to become good friends with for Shabbat.
Yes.
And they know or expect that they're going to get reciprocal invitations. So is this true Hachnasat Orchim, or is this basically a social gesture? And does the mitzvah Hachnasat Orchim mean more and expect more or less?
Great question. We saw, I think 2 weeks ago, that to invite your friends over is at least some level of accomplishment of this mitzvah. However, it's certainly not the highest level of fulfilling what this mitzvah could be. I think we intuitively feel that when a person is hungry, when a person is lonely, when a person is in need, to have such an individual over at one's table is absolutely the greatest fulfillment of this mitzvah. To have someone that's well-fed, very sociable, and always, among others, to have them over at your table, I'm not going to say it's nothing, but it's not the greatest fulfillment of this value. It's something. It's something. I don't want to say it's nothing, but it's certainly, we intuitively feel that the right placed invitation could really be a huge mitzvah. Let's finish with a couple of lines from Rabbi Yitzhak Berkovitz, a contemporary thinker, lives in Jerusalem today, and he's explaining that passage that I just finished sharing with you. He says as follows. Rashi explains that this guest was either not escorted properly or he was not given the honor necessary for him to feel good about himself, so that when bandits came, he was too emotionally depleted to defend himself and so was killed. Therefore, we escort a guest for two reasons. One, to show them the way, and two, to bestow upon them honor, which has practical ramifications for their safety. The mitzvah of inviting guests essentially ensures the provision of food and lodging for a visitor. However, escorting a guest is considered more important, since this accords him honor, leading to enhanced self-esteem, which will help him or even ensure his safety on his journey. Absolutely stunning words to finish with. When we welcome guests, we're welcoming an other, leading to the ultimate other. Sure. Thank you for showing up. And yet when we are able to escort a guest goodbye, we're leaving them with the greatest act of love and the greatest act of fulfilling a sense of their self-esteem and care, knowing that they are truly valued and honored by us. How incredible is this mitzvah? How beautiful is this mitzvah? Now it's upon us. I'm pointing at you. I'm pointing at myself as well. I'm including myself. It's upon all of us to fulfill this mitzvah. Find someone, invite them over. Start easy. Make it a friend. That's okay. And then challenge yourself. Perhaps it doesn't have to be your worst enemy. It doesn't have to be someone you've fallen out with and haven't spoken to, but someone that is a little broader in your concentric circles of life. We all have our inner circle. Who's on the next circle and who's in the next circle? That's your homework. Spend the rest of your life trying to achieve it. And I'm going to include myself in that as well. Okay. I'm going to pause here. Thank you very much, everybody. A point of housekeeping, and we'll communicate this by email as well. Next Tuesday is Purim.
Right.
So I'm not going to be teaching our regular Tuesday class, okay?
Sure.
So going to be reading the Megillah, and I'm not sure you want to see me in my clown costume. So if you've got a costume, dress up. If you can make it to synagogue, hear the Megillah reading, the beloved, beautiful holiday of Purim, one of the most happiest of holidays. So no class next Tuesday, but we will continue a week from Tuesday. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'll see you in two.
Rabbi.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. Be well, everybody. Have a great 2 weeks. Happy Purim.
Happy
And have a
Purim.
wonderful, wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye,
My
Rabbi.
pleasure.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.